BSP trainings. I hope I'm audible to everybody. If you have difficulty, please ping me here. Alright, so the objective of today's session is we'll talk about common roles and responsibilities which one has to do as an administrator, especially Essbase and planning administrator. I'll talk about over here all the roles and responsibility activities, day-to-day job one has to execute. We'll talk about basic to advanced level. So let me first walk you through with the total learning frame, what all we're going to learn step by step. So this training program is focused for somebody who already have working experience in Hyperion or would like to make the career into Hyperion as an administrator. Right. So first we start with, this is our learning path. We'll start with, I'll talk about a very brief level overview of what is the day-to-day responsibility of an Essbase and planning administrator. And then we talk about in detail the solution component, what all consists of EPMA. EPMA solution stack consists of multiple products. We'll talk about each product in detail, and we talk about how these products speak to Hyperion, Essbase and planning, and they speak to each other. Because this training is focused on Essbase and planning administration, we'll talk about in detail the artifacts, objects, component, architecture component of Essbase, ASO, BSO and planning. The architectural component we'll talk about over here, considering that we need to enable Essbase SSO, load balancing, high availability of Hyperion, Essbase and planning. So we'll talk about all the artifacts which require to be set during these activities. Okay, so this is what in this part. And then we go for installation. We go first, there are two kinds of installation. Standard installation. We'll talk about standard. Okay. And we'll talk about custom. In custom installation, I talk about distributed installation. You can configure multiple instances. You can change your database. You can have multiple class instance of your shared services. So we'll talk about distributed installation as well. We'll be using the latest version 11.124. And then we'll talk about how to apply patches. I'll take one or two example, or we'll talk about in detail how to apply. There's a utility called Java utility opatch. In fact, as an administrator, your days should start with seeing what new patches has released, because in an enterprise environment you may have one or more errors are all the time coming from the users, and in order to address those errors, many of time you require to apply patches. So you need to look at the error messages your system is rendering or you're receiving from the system, receiving from the user, and how these error messages are somehow related with your new patches or not. This is even more meaningful when you install a new latest release. A stable release is like 2-3 year old. When you install 3-year old, you're likely to have few patches. When you install a new release, you are going to have more patches. Often you get a patches as part of compatibility check. For example, I recently installed 11.124, right, and I got an error message with my Smart View compatibility board, Internet Explorer 10. I just browsed through the support.oracle.com and I found this is a known issue and this required to apply patches. So this is one of the very critical and very important activity an administrator has to do it. We'll talk about this in detail, how to apply patches. And next we'll talk about, many of time you have just heard of high availability. If your business is 24/7 and it contain critical business data, then downtime is almost zero, right? Or we want uptime 99.9%. As part of your SLA, service level agreement, you mentioned your uptime would be 99.9. So how do you achieve this? You need to have a multiple instance of Hyperion Essbase, and this is called high availability and load balancing. We'll see how to achieve this using OPMN. What parameters are required to be configured in order to ensure your high availability and load balancing for your different EPMA components. So we'll have a 2-3 instance of Essbase. Depends upon the number of users. and nature of data, and what clause are mentioned in your service level agreement. Right. I also talk about some component of disaster recovery. We'll take an example of shared services, SPS and planning. Disaster recovery, we all talk about certain errors, issues like kettle office errors, because of human error or some natural errors, natural issues, right, earthquake and all. How you can have a multiple instance of your shared services and ensure even despite of any error, your system should continue to run. This is part of disaster recovery. Then we jump into product specific component. All we discussed was generic. From point this, we'll talk about product specific. So I'll talk about Essbase configuration parameter. Configuration parameter will not only mug up, we'll talk about the parameter depends upon scenario. For example, my business like to access Hyperion planning, but they like to access all common chart of account. And the common chart of account is really very huge. It's 500,000. They have a 500,000 member in a common chart of account. So the moment they pull data into Hyperion planning crashes. So I need to change Essbase configuration parameter to ensure that it comply by, or it ensure the system doesn't fail. Or I can apply some limit. I say Essbase cannot query, we limit it, query limit, and say if data go beyond certain value, disallow connection. This way we can prevent system being crashed. We can disallow, control system crashing. So we'll talk about Essbase parameters depends upon scenario, not just based on theory and concepts. Then cache management is another important topic. We'll talk about cache management in different scenario. In case you have one server, multi-cluster server. So cache management subject to the nature of data, volume of data, number of users, okay, and the kind of operation people do it. In case I've got a lot of write back, plenty of calculations, my cache management technique would be different. Whereas if I only read only, I'm using ASO cube and all my data access, 90% of my data access is reporting only, then I have a different cache management. So cache management technique is how to change it. Anybody can do this, Google it and see it. But which cache, how much required to be changed, that is more important. And there are certain recommendations which Oracle has given for cache management. We'll talk about them as well. Another biggest performance killer is your fragmentation. Right? Standard fragmentation you can right click and delete all data and load back. You can deal with. But in a large big enterprise, when you have plenty of calculation going on here and there, allocation, calculation, fragmentation is one of the biggest performance killer. How do you automate? How do you minimize fragmentation? First point. And then we talk about fragmentation, granular level of fragmentation detail. How do you read fragmentation? Minimize this. How should you design your solution so they can keep your fragmentation minimum? Often it is least paid attention area, but I have seen by tuning up the fragmentation, uh, it adds a great value in your performance. So we'll talk about a matrix of users, volume of data, and recommendation from Oracle. And then we talk about performance tuning related parameter. We have prepared a very big matrix. In fact, I published one matrix almost 10 years before Essbase and planning. I published this matrix on planning 4.0 and Essbase 7.1 and Hyperion almost 10 years before. So since last 10 years, a lot of properties have changed. In the old days, the server was used to be a mainframe system, other systems. Nowadays, we have a proprietary hardware like Exalytics and all. So our parameters are greatly depends upon underlying hardware you are using. If I'm using Exalytics, I would have different performance tuning parameters. If I'm using normal database, if I'm using 32-bit of system, 64-bit Xeon processor, 8 core, 16 core, 32 core, it greatly depends upon the underlying hardware, not only on software. Okay, volume of data. So we'll talk about performance tuning parameter based upon your underlying hardware and nature of data. And then it comes to my favorite topic, automation. all my cubes are close to 100% automated. If something ad hoc activity comes up, then any human error required. I minimize human intervention. 100% I achieve automation, right? So automation of complete life cycle of Essbase, right from capturing, reading data, writing data, loading, running calculation, you know, defragmenting of your cube, backup, recovery, many things, everything we can automate through Excel. This is the last topic for as per Essbase lifecycle management. Let me talk about some data integrity related issues, right? Um, we talk about optimization of buffer and compression. Compression is needed, especially because nowadays your source system is not conventional RDBMS. In my recently one of my project, I'm pulling data from Salesforce CRM. Salesforce CRM, it is CRM application, but the volume data is really very high, and it's not only data. We have text, comment, supporting details, a lot of supporting details, and therefore there's a need of high level of compression. Before this project, I never thought of the value of compression. I never paid a value of compression much attention. And when I found the text data was high text level data with supporting details, compression really adds a great value in my performance. Backup and recovery, it's we define backup policies. We define backup policy like your data should be backed up 15 days, once in a 15 days, once in 10 days, once a week. What is the backup policy? What is restore? In case you lose your, in case you have a hardware failure, what maximum amount of data you are going to lose it? We'll talk about over here hot backup, cold backup, different backup techniques. In fact, Essbase has got PO, point in time recovery. Point in time. You know that? Point in time, it means if transaction, if I'm executing some transaction, I'm running calcol, and now my my hardware crashes, I can retrieve my data to most recent level just 2 minutes before I can restore my data. Many of them I blocked, documented even 8 years, 10 years before, but we will see them live with live data with current complex business scenarios. Next, couple of things. So that was a process flow. I personally believe if you're an administrator, the first thing you should be very good at logs. I personally learn everything, whatever I know today. Nobody taught me, only system taught me, and I learned it through logs. So the more you learn about log, the more you know about the system. But the challenge over here is like an ocean. There are more than 300 logs files are there, and you cannot have mastering in it. 300 log file. It's pretty difficult for you to know which log file store what information, right? You can see yourself. As the system is growing up, the number of log files are growing, and right now 193, there are over 300 log files. So which log file one should refer, what parameter one should change, how to control log files. My Essbase.log file render, every day it render 1.2 GB. It's such a huge log file, it render 1.2 GB. If I don't truncate it in 1 month, it'll occupy my all system and resources. So truncating, rolling up the log file is also important. These are all some simple to advanced things which you need to consider. 410 log files you have, imagine, right? You need a real robust method so recognize which log file one should refer under which scenario. We'll talk about this. I broadly classify log file by reading, going through multiple blogs, by practicing and all. Broadly classified log files are this way. Log file pertaining to your services directory, right? So you can see this log file under your Oracle instance home. For example, this is my server, and I see what is my Oracle instance home is an environment variable. Under advanced setting, Oracle EPM instance. My Oracle EPM instance is this. Under this path, I would have diagnostic folder. If you're coming from older version of Hyperion, you find if you're working 11.1.3 or 9 version, you find the world has changed completely. So many changes are there, even month, even version over version, so many changes are happening. It is very difficult to accommodate. So you start with, you can split this log file into multiple pieces logically under EPM, Oracle EPM instance. This is what it is configured in my system. Under diagnostic log, you see different category of log: starter log, services log. I start with services log, right? So services log, um, it directly related to your anti services. It means your server services, your workflow services. There are two categories of service: error or output, right? So your focus area is often error. If there's no error, then I switch my focus to output. For example, today 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I started my services. I sort by time. The latest log file we refer today, 805. During my demonstration only, we found this log file. It's an output file. When you open it, often the log file is very huge, so we read the last 4 or 5 rows, which gives us summary information to us. So when I look at this log file, I see there's something wrong. I see the broadcast message over here. Admin server may not be running. The broadcast message I got for my EPMS system 1. Right. Similarly, I have log file for multiple services. Planning log file. I started planning today. What is the status? Again, admin server may not be running. Right. So I found this log file. I'm a little worried. I go to my system and check. Do I have a planning service up and running? I just further investigate. So what is the proper path or investigation? You got a message in log file. Then what do you do next? What do you approach? Many things are not documented. You learn with experience. So when I see my planning is not up and running, I'll go to my WebLogic server, figure out why it is not running. Then I further go to my event log, Windows event, and see what is the last event system recorded. Under control panel, I go to system administration, and then I go to my event log, event view. I go to application specific. Did any hardware failure happen? No hardware failure. I'm happy. One level. Then application specific. I go to application specific and see the last information recorded all this. I sort by event ID on time. 822 the last log recorded, and this is why in last log. So I should be able to correlate how multiple logs speak to each other and which log while one should refer under which scenario. That's next. So go one by one. First, um, service directories, and then you should also look into your WebLogic server, right? That should be the first window. So if you find something wrong, the moment you start your services, there are two ways to check your log file. In case you're using Windows, the moment you start your WebLogic server, which is you can find over here under uh, user project domain. I configure my in single domain, so I see only one log file, start weblogic.log, and I started this log file from backend. Okay, so I see the message over here. It switched from three message: admin to resuming, and then it runs to move to running mode. Right, the system should come to running mode, and then only I can log into my WebLogic server and see my service is up and running. So I can log into my WebLogic server and see what services are up and running. So I should be able to correlate. In WebLogic server, it shows services are running, but I'm a little worried over here. My session expired, so system tag them as unknown. Then you go in turn to each service and figure out the reason behind this showing as unknown. Right? And you can see the dependent service. So some amount of WebLogic administration also skills also required. to see. So when I log in, I see over here planning application is running. I don't have any planning application. I start my planning. I see over here my planning server is down. It's unknown state. Then I look at it is showing as unknown state. And when I start my planning, it is still opening. It is unknown state. But I'm able to open this. It is coming up little slow. So services and WebLogic should be, this is the order. Look at your service, look at your WebLogic server. Okay. Next, you can talk about domain specific services. Like when I started my Foundation services, all dependent components are started or not. So here I find this information. Under domain logic logs, in my case, it is configured over here. WM home environment variable created called middleware home, which is pointing to this in my server. So the middleware home, the user project domain, you can find all foundation services. So under the WebLogic domain directory, you can see all the components. In case your WebLogic or in case your any error pertaining to your foundation services due to application tier, application web server, I can find it out over here. So under domain EPMA server foundation, I can see it over here. This is server related information I get. I see the planning is running, right? But the system shows the unknown state, isn't it? But planning is up and running. Then I like to see further figure out. I go to my EPMA. Under EPMA, I go to diagnostics. Let me see the path. Under user project, domain, EPM system, user project, domain, EPM system. Then we see diagnostic. Under server foundation log 1. So all the server logs are found over here under foundation services. So I can look at a log and see sort by log, timestamp, and this is the last log. Access is 820 and so step by step figure out the last activity achieved. Next level log off is your instance of logging. Okay, in case you're working on multiple instances of your Hyperion server, right, then there are different log files are created. So our instance specific log I can see over here, main log directory. So once you need to have mastery, at least these few logs should be on your tips. In case your service are not starting, which log file you refer to. If log file 1 give you partial information, which log file give you other next level of detailed information. So the chain of logging you should be knowing, right? Start from starting your system, fail to configure, fail to connect database, user is unable to log in. Some 10 or 20 errors are very common which you need to face in day-to-day life. Since users are unable to log in, right? What would you do? Which log file you refer to? The log file may not give complete information. So the 4 categorization I've done over here, you can find all the information. Then it comes to database application specific log. I just talked about essbase.log. In case Essbase configure in OPMN at multiple instance, then I use Essbase underscore ODL. The Essbase log you have, then you have Essbase ODL under diagnostic. This is, I need to look at the Essbase log. One more log I forgot to mention. You need to refer to the starter log, right? So the last time I started my application, the log information is captured over here. So that's product specific login. And in case, because we are working a kind of environment where your client are using different version at the same time. Okay, we're using different version. So what is version compatibility? I have got two virtual machine. I'll demonstrate you simultaneously by using two virtual machine, which is difficult to simulate at your home, right? So we'll be using these two virtual machine and see what's the difference. How do you migrate from one version to another version? At the same time, I can demonstrate your migration and the architecture difference between two version. We'll try to simulate two or three version as well. So migration, upgradation, artifact movement, security migration we'll talk about by keeping two virtual machines simulating as a two environment. Okay. Starter log I just now discussed with you. The moment you start your service and you fail to start services, like in our case it is showing unknown. I supposed to look at the starter log, right? So I wanted to know my system is showing unknown. Does it mean my service is not started? So I go back to my system and check EPM Oracle instance, which is under user project. Under user project, we got a diagnostic log and starter. What is my path in my case in Oracle EPM? Oracle EPM path is pointing to EPM system 1. 1 is for first instance. If you have 2, 3 instance, become 2, 3, 4 like this. Under diagnostic, this is the path. Just want to make sure diagnostic log and starter. So time taken to start your services, we can capture over here. The last time I started my log file at 6 o'clock today, and when I go to the bottom, look at this time taken 16 minutes 58 seconds is pretty much, and you will be surprised to know that I allocated 20 GB. I allocate 20 GB to my virtual machine. I have a 4 physical processor. This virtual machine is really huge, a very huge infrastructure. 20 GB allocated, I have got 4 physical processor. Still, the time taken is 16 minutes 58 seconds. But I have a whole EPMA, right? So that's the starter log file. Patching we'll discuss in detail. It's a kind of thing if you work in Oracle administration, you cannot get rid of. In one or other day you need to apply patches. It's a very troublesome job. Patch, you apply wrong patch is not applied correctly, rolling back of patches. One patch may have conflict with another patch, you apply patch, there's a negative impact. There are numerous issues comes with patching, and it's so troublesome job. First thing is the most troublesome, keeping track of patch. Nowadays, in the old days, I used to get one mail in 1 month, one patch is released. Nowadays, it's like a raining of patches. Every week, 1 or 2 week, we continue to have patches. Okay, so this is very troublesome job, especially working with new release or you're working on POCs. I'm sure if you work in Oracle, you know the kind of patches we apply. One-off patch, which common general language we call one-off patch. If something left during development, ship them as one-off patch. One problem raised with critical, any customer raise any issue with priority P1, right? Yesterday I raised a priority P1 for one of my customer, Bank of America. 24 hours, within 24 hours, okay, they how to give a solution or release a patch. So one-off patch is highly critical based on P1 priority. Then you need to keep track of it. In case you're working with your customer, you can look at your Bugzilla or support.oracle.com and continue to monitor what patches are being published. If this is not critical, we collect one-off patches and become patch set update. P1 of patch is individual, maybe one or two error, which is P1 priority to be captured. Whereas group of patches, we group them, we call patch set update. How to apply patches, that's what we'll see. I'll take one or two patch from support and show you live example of keeping track of patches. Okay, and then once your system is up, and I never say my system is 100% established. and stabilized, which is a real exaggeration. But at least you can ask couple of questions. Some people just start and stop Essbase services and Hyperion services, and they call themselves they are an administrator, but that is completely not correct. How often you start your services, right? If your system is highly unstable, you continue to start and stop your services. Any problem comes up, you want to wash up your hand and just rather than fixing the problem, you start and stop your service, right? So that's one way. How often you start and stop services? How often you reboot your system? In real production server, you cannot reboot it, right? Unless it's real, you require a lot of approval. And every time you request for a system restart, naturally you need to suffix all the required information like where the failure occurred, cause of failure, log over time, routings, and all. So be ready. You should be equipped with all this information before you are requesting for production server restart. Right? Production restart require real. Many of the company follow certain form and pattern. Before you raise a request to restart, you need to specify the reason behind it, downtime, and all. So I'll also show you a couple of reports which I prepare for my client every time we request for restart. I try to avoid restarting, but at least for large database, once in a month it may happen. Okay, some of my application highly stable. I hardly restart once in 6 months. Okay, well, user visibility is very low over here. There are 20-30 users, but here there are many users. Okay. Then you check sometime your system crashes, you need to start individual services. Yesterday, as I said, my client, you were using smart view and they blindly drag and drop whole common chart of account which has got 500,000 member, and my system reaches to the memory allocation, right? Basically there was a problem. We did not limit. Often when I design a space cube, I apply limit. User cannot access more than 500 rows. User cannot occupy, query cannot access more than 30 MB of data. Some kind of restriction we apply. That is called query governance. But new developer may not be aware of all this parameter. My client drag and drop access 500,000 memory common chart of account. My planning crashed. It reached the threshold memory allocated. My WebLogic services got stuck up. It was real chaos. So how to, though you cannot 100% avoid them, but how to deal with them? This forced me to restart my planning service. I did not have any other option. So all these issues, your Essbase server completely crashed, no documentation available. Very common issue. And you got a kind of error message like this. It's an alien Greek word you're finding. XCP files are being rendered when some errors come, like your hardware failure error or something undocumented stuff. So you get XCP file with some huge error code and you don't find any documentation. Then you need to go back and ask your support team, Oracle support. So these are the cases which happen if people abnormally stops Essbase server. There are many other instances. You should be smart enough to handle them. How I'll talk about various parameters. How far you cannot 100% ensure the application 100% stable. It is impossible. But what do you do? What parameter you should set? There are thousands of parameters. Which parameter should set where? Which configuration utility should be used? Which config parameter should be used? So over the period of time for last 7-8 years, 10 years, I continue to watch my log file. I continue to watch forum.oracle and prepare a huge document. Now I'm compiling it. The time has come, right? So I'll show you the log, my compilation which I received in so many years, and show you what parameter you can use it, in day-to-day life. Now the time has come over the period of, for so many years of practice. If any error comes up, it's on my tip. I say go there and look into that log file. But there is no shortcut to this. It took me many years to reach to this point. So what parameter you should do to avoid these situations? How you should design data form? I work as a developer, I work as an administrator. I know the both sides of the coin. We'll talk about some parameter. Like I just now talked about, my client access 500,000 rows, my system crashed. These two property I always set. This ensures nobody can query more than 500 MB of data, or if any request taking more than 3 minutes, truncate this request, stop this request. Somebody has request some data, right? I use error threshold values. Nobody can access my planning application which has data rows more than 100. This is all you can do it to control it. If you give ad hoc reporting capability to the user, naturally the drag and drop, they want all information, right? Without the business user may not be doing all these complexities. So the best idea is to educate them, and the better idea educate them, and the best idea to put some constraints. The WebLogic stability, we still need to take a help from WebLogic administrator at certain points, but some common problems, often very often your thread is stuck up. Okay, your thread is stuck up somewhere, your WebLogic server is not responding, you reach to the memory threshold values, somebody has overutilized your resources, isn't it? So many such issues we'll see. Somebody had run the bad session, somebody log in and left it, somebody run cal call stuck up, running for 2 days, 3 days, somebody run poor calculation script, and with dynamic calc, when I monitor log file, I found the number of blocks, a huge number of blocks are created. So all these things eventually impact my web application, because read and write has happened over the web through web applications. So there's something which you need to deal with. The more you understand WebLogic log file, the better you understand. WebLogic file intern add up close to 40 log files. Remember, 40 log file you need to make a, you know which log file one should use under which scenario. So that's one thing, very time consuming stuff. Then I document a couple of, as I said, I continue to document, put into my Word document if any error comes, and I compile close to 35 to 40 common errors. We'll talk about them. Then one of the good thing, I got a good opportunity in my career to work in setting up the large big enterprise servers, including some major clients. I work with US Analytics, Bank of America. Okay, I'm still working one of the project where the customer has acquired Exalytics server. So we go with Oracle recommendation. Not only me, there are many people work along with me in Oracle team. We go with Oracle recommendation, and we have prepare a matrix where we take common parameters, and depends upon this parameter we suggest the hardware to my customer. For example, recently I worked for a small client, so there was not much analysis was required. The number of users, they have only 20 users, right? Data access was only 10 hours in a day as per SLA, right? My data volume was below 20 GB, right? And similarly, I have a list of all the parameters, my data access pattern, data rate, volumes, block size, block density. I have a total list. When I capture all this information, at least basic information, I suggest to my client what they're supposed to do. So common suggestion is like number of physical server, number of physical servers, number of cores, like the system I'm using, it's my QA server, right? I put 16 core processor, 16 cores. Then you have a memory. People often think memory is only RAM. There are 3 levels of RAM in server use: L1, L2, L3. You know what is the amount of RAM required in all 3 levels? The processor type. Like if you go for Xeon processor, Xeon also has, there are hundreds of processors out there: 2, 3 series, 4 series, 5 series. Now we have 7 series processor. We go for Xeon server, like the server which this system is i7. One more system is connected with me is Xeon 2407. I suggested my client, because my client budget was, he wanted everything in the server cost. It's a home based server, and they wanted to cost under you know 2000 USD. It's pretty low because their data volume is really low. So I suggested them Xeon server 2704, 247, I think 2704. I don't remember exactly, but it was 6 core, right? But it has got physical, the The motherboard could support 4 physical servers. So I give them opportunity. Today, your 16 cores, right? And their data volume in next 5 years, data growth pattern defined, up to 500 GB of data they can accommodate, right? Without any hardware change. Plus, if a company has an acquisition merger, up to 300 users my system can have. So this is a scalability. When you define a hardware, you need to define a scalability. The beauty is that there are a lot of documentation available, for scalability and hardware recommendations. You can refer these documents. You need a little amount of hardware as well. What kind of processors are there? What L1, L2, L3 RAM, cache, codes, the kind of processor are supported. So this is an example. Recommendations are given over here. In case this is along with the Essbase parameters. So there are different parameters. For example, this parameter has come this in the 11.124 release, worker thread. Recently I explored. So as I said, I work for Salesforce CRM application. The volume data is really, really high. So 90% of my resources has been used by only one application, CRM application. What we wanted, I want to allocate my resources. 90% of my resource should allocate to one application only. So this is possible to allocate threads, or you can manually define how many threads can cater my one application. So you can define number of threads. You have more control. Increase and decrease the number of threads available within a thread pool. 90% of resources are allocated to this. So in case your 32-bit of system, 8 core, 16 core, 32 core, Exalytic server, which is up to 100 cores are available, right? So then we have an in-memory solution. The cost of server comes around 200,000 USD above. That is really big enterprise system. So it takes some time for you to get hands-on with this. You may not get very often these such opportunity to work on this environment, but we'll at least go through it. I cannot demonstrate you this thing live. I don't have Exalytic server naturally, but I can at least give you some recommendation. With Xeon server, I put 2 server with 16 core. What parameter you can do? We can do a benchmarking as well. So we'll try to hands-on as much as possible. This is an ocean. We cannot expert overnight. It'll take you time. It's only your practice that makes you experts. So that would be a high level learning path for us. I stop here. An open question for you. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Yeah, anybody have any question?